In this video, we'll be talking about the item Hearthstone from World of Warcraft and not the card game Hearthstone, which is made by the same company. The Hearthstone is the very first item you will ever obtain, as well as the most important item in everyone's bag. This item, for those of you who don't know, when used and after a long cast time, teleports you to your home inn, which you can set anywhere you wish as long as there's an innkeeper there to accept your hearth. Originally, this item had a 1-hour cooldown, an insane thing by today's standard, but that was vanilla for you. It kinda just fit in with everything else. Something many people don't know is that wherever you stand, and whatever direction you're facing when you set your Hearthstone, is where you will appear when you actually hearth. So in some places you could even set your Hearthstone outside the building if the innkeeper was close enough to the wall, allowing you to mount up right away. While the Hearthstone can be deleted, simply speaking to an innkeeper and setting your Hearthstone there will spawn a new one for you. The Hearthstone seems like quite a powerful object, something you simply use that teleports you home, so surely that would solve all kinds of problems in lore. So, with that, it must be purely a mechanical thing and not a real item in lore, right? Well, no actually. There was multiple times they are used and referenced. In the novel Storm Rage, they are said to be very rare. King Varian himself only believed them to be a legend. Tyrande and Brawl also used them to retreat to Darnassus after the attack on Stormwind by the Nightmare. However, Tyrande had to cancel her cast as she was attacked. Later, in The Shattering, the prelude novel to Cataclysm, Jaina gives Anduin a Hearthstone that brings him to her home in Theramore, so he may find more time to have a normal childhood, instead of the politics of Stormwind all the time. This would end up saving his life, as he used it to escape Ironforge after the Dark Iron took control of the city. So, these items do exist in lore, but they are very rare. Although many quests while exploring the world of Azeroth give them to us, as well as every new character being given one from the start. Imagine a game of World of Warcraft where they stuck to lore very hard, and the Hearthstone was some legendary-like item where you needed to spend massive amounts of gold on it, and entire quest lines to unlock. While epic, I'm sure most people would agree how it is now is a much more preferable method, considering the fact it's probably one of the most useful items in the game. Fun fact, the starting location for races, where you appear when you spawn in, is a special location that can never be recovered. The second you change your Hearthstone to a new location, you can no longer go to that old location through a Hearthstone anymore, as the location is set from creating your character and is not a default position. Now, getting back on topic, I'm sure many of you have probably heard of the term called bubble hearthing, but for those of you who don't know, taking damage while casting your Hearthstone interrupts it. However, paladins have an ability called Divine Shield, which allows them to be invincible for some time, and by pairing these together, paladins could pull off the full cast time of a Hearthstone in the middle of combat and leave pretty much any situation, especially before immune breakers were added to the game in TBC. Imagine this, you're in the Maw with war mode on, trying to get bonus Stygia or whatever. You forgot to spend your Stygia and have 10,000 of it on you, but suddenly a rogue has attacked you. Now what do? Well, you cast Divine Shield, and then cast your Hearthstone, and the rogue can do nothing but watch. Well, most of the time, unless there's a passing priest or warrior who pops the bubble for them. Before we move on, there's also the Shaman Astral Recall ability. This spell acts like a second Hearthstone, having a 15-minute cooldown. Insane, right? While the normal player could hearth only once an hour, a shaman could hearth 5 times an hour. There was also 2 glyphs that worked with this ability. Astral Fixation, which when added in Mists of Pandaria, brought you to your capital's Earth Shrine instead of your hearth location. However, it has since been removed with the new glyph system. And also the glyph of Astral Recall in Wrath of the Lich King, which originally reduced its cooldown by 2.5 minutes, but was then quickly buffed to reduce the cooldown by 7.5 minutes instead, which basically cut its cooldown in half, giving shamans one of the shortest Hearthstone times ever. In Mists of Pandaria, it was nerfed to an only 5-minute reduction, and then removed in Legion with the glyph rework. But they did bake its cooldown reduction directly into the ability, so it's still at a 10-minute cooldown to this day. Originally, there was a thing called ghetto hearthing that allowed players, through the use of groups and nearby dungeons, to hearth even without a cooldown. As if you were in a dungeon or raid and simply left group, after 1 minute you would be teleported to your Hearthstone location. But with Wrath of the Lich King, Blizzard changed this, making it so when you were kicked from an instance, you would be brought to the closest graveyard instead. And to make up for this, they halved the cooldown of the Hearthstone from 1 hour to 30 minutes, to then only be halved again in Cataclysm with the addition of the guild leveling system, with the ability Hasty Hearth. Although originally your guild had to unlock this ability, when they later removed the guild levels, you now just get it automatically when you join a guild. Now, we could go over every single item and class spell that teleports you from one place to another like a Hearthstone, but that would be insane. So instead, we will only talk about items that work in the same way that the Hearthstone does, teleporting you to a place that you can change the outcome of. And so first, we should talk about the Volpera racial ability, Make Camp. This ability allows you to place a tent somewhere in the open world and even stays visible for some time. And then it will be set as your spawn point. So you can set it anywhere you want, a special rare spawn location, the auction house, the entrance of a raid you farm, whatever and wherever you want. Not whenever you want though, because Return to Camp has a 1 hour long cooldown, so it's a tiny bit longer than the default Hearthstone, but can be used in addition to it, so it's nothing but a plus. There's also the Hearth Kidney Stone, an ability given to players of the Necrolord Covenant who choose the Emini Soulbind and its ability. This is a Hearthstone that can be set separately from your usual Hearthstone, allowing you to have 2 Hearthstone locations at a time. However, it has a 12-hour cooldown, which seems kind of long, right? Well, every killing blow you do while this Hearthstone is on cooldown reduces the cooldown by 5 minutes. Although funny enough, as this Hearthstone is an ability and not an item, bosses that would cast mind controls on players would sometimes choose to use their longest cooldown ability to help them kill their non-controlled allies. But because this is an ability, that made it a choice for this. For example, the final boss of Turn Scythe, causing mind-controlled players to hearth mid-fight, and sometimes worked with a mage's teleport too, ruining quite a few Mythic Plus keys, although this was thankfully fixed rather quickly once it became well known. We also got 2 special Hearthstones from the expansions Warlords of Draenor and Legion, the first being the Garrison Hearthstone. This item was granted upon creating your garrison, and acted just like a normal Hearthstone. However, it could not have its location changed, always bringing you back to your garrison, and luckily did not share cooldown with your regular Hearthstone. And the other item, the Dalaran Hearthstone, was granted to you after completing the Legion intro, allowing you to, just like the Garrison Hearthstone, teleports you to one set place that you can't change with a 20-minute cooldown. This time though, teleporting you to the Dalaran floating above the Broken Isles. Next, we'll talk about the items with Hearthstones built into them. First, the Ruby Slippers from Karazhan. These cloth boots are of course based on the Ruby Slippers from Wizard of Oz, and clicking your heels together, these would teleport you to your Hearthstone location. Then in Return to Karazhan and Legion, we had the astonishingly Scarlet Slippers. Just an updated version of the Ruby Slippers, they do the exact same thing. Sad thing to mention is these 2 items shared a cooldown with your Hearthstone, meaning all they did was save a spot in your bags if you didn't want to carry around a Hearthstone, and instead wore these as gear. However, the Montebank's Colorful Cloak, a cloak which dropped in the Operation Megagon Mega Dungeon, had a Hearthstone built into it, but it did not share the cooldown with your Hearthstone, instead having a baseline 1-day cooldown built in, meaning carrying around this item gave you a second Hearthstone, although once a day. We've also had a few consumable Hearthstones over the years in WoW, first being the Scrolls of Recall 1, 2, and 3 from Wrath of the Lich King. These items were made and usable by scribes. With a 20-minute cooldown, these scrolls teleported you to your Hearthstone location and were consumed on use. However, they had one downside. The Scroll of Recall level 1 only worked up to level 40. If you were above level 40, it would instead teleport you to a random location all over Azeroth instead of your Hearthstone location. So once you hit level 40, you needed to use the Scroll of Recall level 2, which worked up to level 70. But yet again, if you were over level 70, it would teleport you to a random location around Azeroth. So you would move on to the Scroll of Recall 3, which worked for anyone level 80 and below, which worked amazingly till Cataclysm came out and we went above level 80 and no new Scrolls of Recalls were added. But it is a fun item to use for alt, I suppose. Or if you just want to have fun and be teleported to a random location in Azeroth. And the next item, called the Scroll of Town Portal, which could be obtained during the Diablo Anniversary event in WoW by killing the Cout King or treasure goblins found in Dalaran Sewers or Darkshire, where you can get a lot of these little scrolls, which work just like Scrolls of Recall, just without the level requirements. These scrolls, consumed on use, teleported you to your Hearthstone location, and with no cooldown too. The only thing holding you back was how many you farmed before the event was over. And speaking of the Diablo event and these scrolls, let's move on to the final and biggest part of the video, Hearthstone replacements. Blizzard added quite a few items in WoW that replaced Hearthstones, usually by just giving an item a new name. There was little special about these items at first. However, with Warlords of Draenor and the addition of the toy box, these items all got the toy tag, meaning you no longer had to hold them in your bag and could simply use them from the toy box. Now you could save on inventory slots by simply using one of these Hearthstones and getting rid of the one on your back. For example, the Tome of Town Portal. This was the tome from the Diablo 20th anniversary event, and was created by using 10 of the town scrolls combined together with a blank book. While the tome itself had no actual unique effect, it was an easy way for players to get a toy Hearthstone, as the only other easy one at the time was the innkeeper's Hearthstone, a Hearthstone obtained from archaeology, that sometimes, upon hearthing, would cause a dwarf woman spirit to follow you around for a bit. Next, we have the Cosmetic Hearthstones. These Hearthstones are earned in one way or another and actually have a cosmetic effect when casting them, making them quite unique, and a fun way to spice up the usual simple green hand effect that the Hearthstone has. The Headless Horseman's Hearthstone came from the Hollow's End and is bought with tricky treats, and in fact all of the holiday ones are basically bought with their respective holidays' currencies, like the Lunar Elder's Hearthstone, the Love is in the Air Hearthstone, Noble Garden, Midsummer Fire Festival, and Brewfest. The Great Father's Winter Hearthstone, the one for Feast of Wintervale, does not cost any currency and is simply obtained from the gently shaken gifts from under the Wintervale tree. And those are all the holiday Hearthstones. Next, we have the Holographic Digitization Hearthstone, crafted from the Junkyard Tinker and Mechagon. Then we have the Eternal Traveler's Hearthstone, obtained from buying the Shadowlands Epic Edition, the Dark Portal, a Hearthstone obtained from the TCG pack Betrayal of the Guardian, with a rarity of 1 in 132 booster packs. Also, the Ethereal Portal from the TCG, this time from the Ice Crown expansion, with a 1 in 121 booster pack odds, this being the first ever Hearthstone replacement, and added in Wrath of the Lich King. Lastly, we have the 4 Covenant Hearthstones. These are bought from the respective Covenants and Shadowlands for Anima after reaching Renown 11. And that's it for the history of Hearthstones. As you can see, the Hearthstone has had only a couple of actual changes over its lifetime, its biggest thing just being how important it is, and how in BFA, Blizzard went crazy with giving players alternative Hearthstone toy items, a trend that continues to this day.